Nobody was ready. The arena was breathing on its own, loud and restless, buzzing with the confidence that tonight held no surprises. The match was already locked in. The crowd thought it knew where the night was going, because WWE trains its audience to expect chaos but on a schedule. This wasn't supposed to be that kind of moment. This was supposed to be routine. Then everything stopped. No leaked music. No camera panic. No sudden commentary warning. Just silence. The kind of silence that feels heavier than noise. Because everyone senses something is wrong, but no one knows why. Fans stopped waving signs. Phones froze mid-air. Even the ring announcer hesitated, like an instinct had kicked in before logic could catch up. You could almost hear thousands of people holding their breath at the same time. And then it happened. The lights shifted, not flashy, not dramatic, but intentional. As if whoever was controlling them knew this moment didn't need help. The entrance screen didn't explode with graphics. Instead, it showed nothing. Just black. That's when the arena detonated. Not because they saw her. Not because they heard her, but because they knew. Recognition hit before confirmation. And that's when chaos becomes emotional. Screams weren't excitement anymore, they were disbelief. Commentators lost structure in there. Voices, sentences fell apart. One of them actually stopped talking entirely. Like the brain needed a second to reboot. When she finally stepped forward, it didn't look like a return. It looked like a memory walking back into reality. The kind of figure fans thought they'd already processed, already mourned, already accepted is gone. Some fans cried. Others laughed in shock. A few just stood there, hands on their heads, staring like they were afraid she might disappear if they blinked. Because this wasn't nostalgia. This wasn't fan service. This was something WWE hadn't prepared them for. Nobody expected her tonight, but she returned. And in that instant, every storyline on the show became meaningless because the real story had just begun. Shock doesn't sound the same as joy. That became clear the moment the noise stopped being rhythmic and turned raw. This wasn't chanting. There was no timing, no unity. It was emotional overflow, people reacting before their minds caught up. Some fans yelled her name. Others couldn't even remember it, stumbling over syllables through tears and laughter. Strangers hugged without speaking. A grown man in the second row wiped his face and nodded to no one in particular, like he'd just been proven wrong about something he'd felt for years. This was bigger than a pop. The ring sat ignored. Wrestlers stood frozen, suddenly irrelevant, caught in the worst position imaginable, alive in a moment that didn't belong to them anymore. One of them looked toward the entrance with frustration, not anger, but realization. Careers are built on moments like this, and someone else was owning it. Cameras pan wildly, unable to choose what mattered more, her slow, controlled steps or the emotional wreckage in the crowd. WWE audiences are used to surprise, but this wasn't a twist, it was a collision with unfinished history. Because she didn't wave, she didn't smile, she didn't rush. She felt the moment. Every step was measured, almost reverent. Like she understood exactly how long people had been waiting without knowing it. Fans began shouting questions at the screen, at each other, at the universe. Is this real? Turned into why now? The crowd wasn't just reacting, they were remembering. All the unfinished rivalries. All the moments that were supposed to happen but didn't. All the endings that never felt earned. This was grief turning into adrenaline. And then there was that look. The one she gave the ring. Not hunger. Not fear. Reflection. As if she wasn't just returning to WWE but confronting it. The company had changed. The roster had changed. The fans had grown older. But the reaction proved something painful and powerful. No one had replaced her. She hadn't been erased. She hadn't faded. She'd been waiting. And now that the crowd had lost control, we realized something terrifying. They couldn't control this either. While the arena exploded, backstage went cold. Not silent cold. The kind where people move but don't speak. Where producers pretend to look busy because standing still would mean processing what just happened. This wasn't on the run sheet. that detail mattered more than fans would ever know. Because unplanned moments create legends, but they also create problems. Cameras caught performers peeking through curtains, their faces registering shock first, calculation second. Opportunity and threat arrived together. Some smiled, some clenched their jaws. One veteran leaned back against a crate, arms folded, watching the monitor with narrowed eyes. Not angry, aware. There's a difference between being surprised and being displaced, and several people knew instantly which they were. Officials whispered. Phones came out. Messages were sent that shouldn't exist. During a live show, someone muttered, "This changes everything," and nobody contradicted them, because it did. Here was the truth WWE never likes to admit. Returns aren't just emotional events. They rewrite timelines. They expose gaps. They force comparisons. And this one carried weight nobody wanted to lift. Because her name didn't just echo with fans, it echoed in locker room memories. Stories of pressure, of expectations, of standards so high they broke people trying to reach them. Younger stars stared at the screen in disbelief, watching someone they'd grown up studying suddenly become their present. Legacy isn't inspiring when it's theoretical. It becomes intimidating when it walks past you in real time. And still she hadn't said a word. That silence backstage was louder than any music cue. Because everyone knew the same thing. Once she spoke, lines would be drawn. Pushes would change. Narratives would shift. Someone's momentum would die quietly so hers could live loudly. This wasn't about stealing a spotlight. This was about reclaiming a chapter WWE thought was closed. And as producers scrambled to adjust, one thing became painfully clear: this return didn't create tension. It revealed it. The moment didn't stay contained. It never does anymore. Before she even reached the ring, the outside world had already caught fire. Clips spread faster than commentary. Headlines were written before anyone knew what her message would be. Fans at home screamed alone in their living rooms, replaying the moment to confirm it wasn't a trick of memory. Social feeds flooded with one sentence repeated differently every time: "She's really back." But celebration wasn't the only reaction. Debate began instantly. Was this the right time? Was this fair to others? Was WWE reaching back because it had nothing left to build forward? The questions multiplied, feeding the chaos. Former rivals posted cryptic messages. Old allies went silent. Silence, especially here, said everything. Because when someone returns like this, they force everyone connected to them to respond, even by not responding. And then there was family, the part fans never see. Somewhere far from the lights, someone who'd watched her break, heal, and rebuild sat quietly, knowing what this meant. Pride mixed with fear. Because returns don't just reopen careers, they reopen wounds. This wasn't a highlight reel moment. This was commitment. Media outlets called it iconic before it finished breathing. But icons come with expectations, and expectations are heavy. Everyone wanted answers now. Was she staying? Was this one night? Was something bigger coming? She didn't give them clarity, because clarity would have shrunk the moment. Instead, WWE sat at the center of a storm it didn't fully create and couldn't fully steer. Fans weren't just watching anymore. They were speculating, protecting, criticizing, and projecting. This return became a mirror. People didn't see her, they saw what they missed, and that made it dangerous. By the time she stood in the ring, the noise had changed again. Not louder, deeper, more focused. The kind of sound that comes from respect, not surprise. She looked out at the crowd, slowly, intentionally letting the night settle. And then she did something unexpected. Nothing. No speech. No gesture. She just stood there. That's when it hit. This wasn't about a comeback match. This wasn't about nostalgia or shock value. This was about presence. About reminding WWE what it feels like when something matters without explanation. Fans filled the silence with meaning of their own. Some saw closure. Others saw a beginning. WWE saw average. But what she saw was harder to define, because returning isn't the same as reclaiming. She hadn't promised anything. No contract revelation. No target pointed. Just a reminder that the past isn't done when people decide it is. It's done when it chooses to be. As the show moved on, everything felt slightly off. Matches happened. Promos aired. But the electricity lingered unclaimed. Like the building itself hadn't moved on yet. And that's the twist. This wasn't a moment designed to change WWE overnight. It was designed to sit with it, to haunt storylines, to pressure egos, to remind everyone, fans included, that some legacies don't fade quietly, they wait. Nobody expected her tonight, but she returned, not to shock, not to dominate, but to prove that the simplest moments, when done honestly, can still shake an entire world.